Hello everybody, this is Dr. David Cheng and this is your class on fueling your leadership using psychological capital. Now, as you're all aware, when it comes to this course, it's usually done in person and not in some sort of video online format. So to try and get the most out of this course, what I recommend you do is you try and grab a classmate from this course and watch the video together. That gives you an opportunity to stop and pause at times when we have a discussion or an activity, and you can discuss the topic with the person sitting next to you. Alternatively, if you can't find somebody like that, maybe you're sitting at home, it might be good to grab a family member or a flatmate or whoever you're staying with every now and then and have a chat to them about some of the issues we raise in this course or in this class. Another thing I just want to bring to your attention is that you'll notice if you look at the video that it's a lot shorter than our normal video, a normal class time. And one of the reasons obviously is because I've cut out the discussion time, so you're going to have to pause the video at time to discuss with the person next to you or think about things. The other thing is, as with my other classes, I usually play another video. Now I've obviously cut that from this video that you're watching, but I've put links to that on your wattle. So you'll see here there'll probably be a video on resilience, a video on self-efficacy as well, and they're about 10-15 minutes long each. So every now and then, or not every now and then, but a couple, 2 or 3 times during this video, I actually say, pause this video, go and click on that link, watch that video, and you'll go and go off and watch that video first and then come back. Now, one thing I'll say is that depending on how I put it online onto your course management website, sometimes it might have to be a file that you download, and those files might be quite large. So make sure you have bandwidth to download those files. Sometimes I may be able to get a hyperlink to a sort of a YouTube or Vimeo or one of those kinds of things. So just be aware of that. That may affect how you interact with this particular class. So anyway, let's get started. So we're talking about psychological capital, or fueling your leadership using psychological capital. So what are we going to do today in this particular class? We're going to talk about what is psychological capital, or Psycap for short. You'll hear me refer to it as Psycap. We're going to talk about the components of Psycap. We're going to look at how you can increase your psychological capital, and then we're going to talk about the impact of having a high psychological capital on your own leadership. So to get us started, I want you to think about this. What sort of capital might you have? Now, normally we think about physical and financial capital. What are the sort of assets that you have at your disposal? Do you have buildings, machinery? Do you have a house? If you have a business, you're thinking about machinery and equipment. That's useful for your business. It's also useful for leadership as well, if you can draw on those sorts of assets, physical assets. We also can talk about financial assets, or financial capital, should I say? Cash, shares, money, right? If you want to go well in your leadership, having a lot of money is helpful. If you don't need to draw a salary, then it will change the way you lead. You don't have to be worried about having an income. So both physical and financial capital are things we're both very familiar with, or we're all very familiar with, and useful in terms of just our life and also in terms of our leadership. In one of our previous classes, we've talked about social capital, or your network capital. Being able to know people, being able to connect people, being able to draw on your network for knowledge, for resources, for skills, all very helpful in leadership as well. Today, and for the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about what's in your head, psychological capital. And this is a really important thing. So when we look at psychological capital, we want to think about we're going to go beyond what you know and who you know. So, we talk about the slide before, we talk about, psychological capital, we talk about who you know. And if you remember during that class, we'll also talk about what you know, your knowledge set. So in terms of psychological capital, we're talking about who you intend to become. So there are 4 components of psychological capital, and we're going to spend most of this class going through each of those elements, or especially the first 2. So there's confidence and self-efficacy, confidence or self-efficacy. Now, I will generally refer to this as self-efficacy from now on, although there are other people refer to this as confidence or self-confidence. And this is about, the can-do attitude. Do you think you can do something? We'll also talk about resilience, and this is about the ability to bounce back. We'll talk about hope, or willpower and way power. And for the most part, we're going to talk We won't talk so much about this, and the reason for that is because willpower actually goes a lot into one of the future week's topics on self-control. But we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll also talk about optimism, the probable positive outcome. Now, also, we won't talk so much about optimism as much as the first two, and the reason for that is partially optimism is dealt with in when we talk about positive emotions and positive attitudes. So for the most part, we're going to talk about confidence, self-efficacy, or should I say self-efficacy primarily, and resilience, or the ability to bounce back. Now, when we talk about psychological capital from a definitional perspective, we need to know that psychological capital is a motivational tendency that positively influences the desirable attitudes, behaviors, and performance of employees and can neutralize undesirable behavior. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to have. And all four of the components of Psycap are measurable, beatable, manageable, and have the capacity to offer more effective performance at work. So if you're a leader, you want your people to have high psychological capital, or you want to build their psychological capital. Another thing that's important is that when you look at these things, self-efficacy, resilience, hope, and optimism, you need to know that psychological capital is what we call a second-order core construct. Right? What that means is this: each of these sort of elements, self-efficacy, resilience, hope, and optimism, they lead to performance, or they increase performance. But psychological capital, as in all of these combined together, explain performance a lot better than the individual items. So it's really important to know that. Not so much that, I guess to some extent you could sort of say they work well in combination together. Okay, so let's work through the first two. We're going to start with self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is an idea brought about by Bandura. Now, Bandura is one of the fathers of this area, and is really important if you want to understand more about self-efficacy, that you read some of his work. So, self-efficacy is people's beliefs in their capabilities to produce desired effects by their own actions. What does that mean? Do you believe you can do what you need to do? That's a more simple way of doing it. Do you have confidence in yourself that you can do what you need to do? Right? He's also found that people who regard themselves as highly efficacious, high in self-efficacy, they act, think, and feel differently from those who perceive themselves as inefficacious. Sorry, I'm sort of stuffing up the words, but you get the idea. People who regard themselves as being high in self-efficacy act, think, and feel differently from those who think of themselves as being low in self-efficacy. They produce their own future rather than simply foretell it. So what we find is that there's usually two things, right? When we look at this, we need to understand there's efficacy expectations and outcome expectations. So outcome expectations involves, do you know what needs to be done? And efficacy outcomes is, do you think you've got what it takes to do what needs to be done, right? So you need both of these things to be high in self-efficacy. You need to know what needs to be done, because if you don't know what needs to be done, how can you be high in self-efficacy? How can you think you're going to be able to achieve it if you don't actually know what it is that you need to achieve, if you get what I mean? Right? So the higher your efficacy expectations or expectancies, the harder you will work to achieve your goal, leading to higher probability. Now, self-belief is really important. High self-efficacy is really important. Now, you can see here from Bandura again, he says, unless people believe that they can produce desired effects and prevent undesired ones by their actions, they have little incentive to act in the first place. Right? So I want you to think about this. If you believe you can do something, or you believe in doing something, you'll affect the outcome, you're more likely to do it. If you don't believe, you can affect the outcome, it makes no difference. So I'll give you an example. Let's look at going to the gym or getting fit, right? Generally speaking, we like to think that, doing exercise leads to increased fitness. You reduce your fat, increase your muscle, all those kinds of things. So if you believe that, and if you believe you can do the exercise, then you're more likely to do it. Another way of thinking about it is this. Let's say you're going to enter a competition, right? And you look at the other competitors and you think, I'm here to win. That's what I need to do. If I don't win, there are bad consequences. I need to win, right? And then you look at the other competitors and you see amongst the other competitors all these Olympic athletes, right? In which case you think, look, doesn't matter how fast I run, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to win the competition. These are Olympic athletes. So you just give up. But if you look at the other races and you look at them and you go, well, they're okay races, but they're not that great. I think I can actually beat them, right? They're good, but you think you're better, then you're more likely to put in a lot more effort than say if they're Olympic athletes, and you're more likely to achieve a better race time. Another example could be, let's think about the lotto, right? So with lotteries, we know, generally speaking, it's up to chance. And so when you think about the lotto, if it's up to chance and you don't think it's really a matter of your effort, all you do is you might just say, look, I'm not going to enter the lotto. Or if you do, you just put any number down because the numbers don't really matter as far as you're concerned. You put less effort in, and chances are you won't win either, right? So we need to understand that you want to be high in self-efficacy, you need to believe that you can produce the desired effects, that you can win, or that you can get that good mark, or that you can, whatever it is, right? You need to also believe that you can influence the outcome. If you don't believe you can influence the outcome, you probably won't do it. You also need to know that beliefs of personal efficacy shape whether people attend to the opportunities or to the impediments that their life circumstances present, and how difficult or alarming any obstacles appear. Right? So again, think about, say, fitness. If you are there are some people who, and you could be one of them, you struggle with your weight, right? And you go, oh, look, I've tried dieting once or twice before, I tried exercise once before, it doesn't work for me, right? If you believe that, you don't believe it can work for you, then if somebody comes along and says, okay, you need to lose weight for something, you're probably not going to put much effort in because you don't believe you can do it. You don't, right? Alternatively, if you believe you can do it, right, then you're more likely to put more effort. You're more likely to take the opportunity. Yeah. Another example might be, think about a management position, right, or a graduate position. Let's say, I know many of you are looking to graduate soon. Maybe you look at your marks and you hear there's a company out there saying they're hiring graduates, and you might say, well, look, I'm looking at the competition. I look at my marks. I think I got a reasonable chance of getting a job at that company. You might put a lot of extra effort into your final semesters. You might do a lot of time talking to people, networking with people, trying to take hold of that opportunity to get that graduate job. And you hopefully will get that graduate job. Alternatively, if you don't think you can do it, you might look at your marks and you go, oh, I don't know whether I can do this. And you doubt yourself, you doubt your ability. Then you may put in less effort. You might even give up and even try to search for jobs. Right? So self-belief or self-efficacy is really, really important. Now, research has shown, and there are study after study after study that show this, that being high in self-efficacy leads to a whole heap of positive outcomes. Those with high in self-efficacy set more challenging goals. Right? They self-select into difficult tasks. They're more motivated. They're more likely to persevere when you're faced with obstacles. And the outcomes of this are, better work performance, better work attitudes, better leadership, more creativity, greater participation, all those kinds of things. And again, my example that I gave you before with weight is that, or with weight, or with getting a job, and all these kinds of things is valid. So you think about it, right? If you want to win a running competition, if you think you've got a chance, right, then you might set a high goal in terms of the speed that you run it with, right? You might put more effort into training. Whilst if you don't really think you're good at running, you might not really put any goal. You might be like, oh, I'll just enter the race. Maybe I'll complete the race. Maybe I'm not. Whatever sort of thing, right? And if with that sort of attitude, you probably train less, and you probably your outcome in terms of your ability to run is probably going to be lower. Same with study, right? If you think you're good at a subject, you might set a higher goal. You might be like, well, I'm good at this subject. I want to get a distinction or a high distinction. And so you work harder at the assignments. And when you find difficulty at the assignment, you go, okay, even though it's a difficulty, I'm going to try and work out this problem and do well in this assignment. If you're low self-efficacy, you might be like, oh, look, I don't know, this subject's hard, I'm not good at this subject, don't worry about it, I'm just not going to bother, I'll just do the minimum that I can do and hopefully I'll pass. Yeah? So that's the basic principles, behind self-efficacy. So again, on this side, you can see the differences between strong and weak self-efficacy. So, if you are high in self-efficacy, you view challenging problems as tasks to be mastered. Whilst if you're weak in self-efficacy, you go, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to give up. I'm just going to avoid that situation totally. Strong ones, you'll focus on opportunities, you develop a deeper interest in the activities. Weaker ones, you kind of, you believe that are difficult tasks beyond your capabilities. It's too hard, not even going to bother trying. You'll focus on your problems, you'll focus on personal failings, you'll dwell on the impediments. Too much, too hard, too difficult, not going to do this kind of thing. So, this is why we need to have high self-efficacy. Now, one of the key questions which you might ask before we even get to this part is, what is, when we talk about self-efficacy, what's the difference between that and just say like high self-esteem? Now, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, but even before I get to actually self-esteem, let's go back a second. One of the things you need to know is that there's also two different types of self-efficacy. So there's general self-efficacy and specific self-efficacy. So general self-efficacy is, in general, are you confident that you're able to do stuff? Right? You'll know that there are some people who are more self-confident in general. You ask them, can you do any, can you run? Yeah, I can run well. Can you do art? Yeah, I can do good art. Can you do poetry? Yeah, I'm good at poetry. Everything in general, they just answer in general higher, that they're better in general at doing almost everything. So that's general self-efficacy. There's also specific self-efficacy. So when I ask you whether you can do something, most of you will tell me, well, what do you want me to do? If you want me to do maths, I'm really good, but if you want me to do, say, poetry, I'm not very good. Or if you want me to speak in Tamil, I'm really good, but if you want me to speak in German, I'm not so good, or French, or whatever it might be. Right? So there's also specific and general self-efficacy. Here in this particular course, we're talking about general self-efficacy, but the rules apply to specific self-efficacy. So again, you think about it. Let's say you think you're good at maths, and I give you some maths tasks, or this is a maths course. You might set higher goals in regard to your maths marks. When you face a difficult maths problem, you'll go, okay, this is a challenge. I can try and overcome it. Alternatively, if you don't think you're good in maths, you'll go, oh, it's a maths task, I'll set lower goals. If I just pass the course, I'll be happy. I'll try not to do extra problems and that sort of thing. So we need to know that. Okay, so self-efficacy and self-esteem, really important question here. Self-efficacy is different to self-esteem. What do you think? Write down what you think here. This is another case where you can stop and think for a few seconds before we move on. Now, there is a difference to self-esteem and self-efficacy. We'll talk a little bit more about this in next week in the next few weeks when we talk more about the mind and what people think. But self-esteem is more about what you think of yourself. Self-efficacy is what do you think about your own abilities. And there's a big difference. Again, I'll talk about this in the future weeks, but in Australia anyway, especially through the 60s, 70s, 80s, there's this big movement on increasing people's self-esteem, telling everybody, oh, they're good, they're great, they're pretty, they're good-looking, all that kind of stuff. And that has led to a lot of problems, right? Because we're telling people they're good when they might not actually be good at all, right? Self-esteem is about how you value yourself. And as I said, we'll talk about that more in future weeks. Self-efficacy, whether you think you can do something or things well in general. Okay, so a question that most people would ask is, okay, you've told me that self-efficacy is good. I'm generally a person who's low in self-confidence. I don't think highly of my ability to do stuff. How do I increase my self-efficacy? Right? How do you develop your self-efficacy? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about what you would do. Right? So I'm going to give you a few scenarios, and I want you to try and answer these questions yourself. So you may want to pause the video at times, write down what you think, and we'll see how we go. Okay, so here's question about self-efficacy and managing others. So you have an employee who's clever, creative, and is a real asset to your team. However, this person is terrified of speaking in front of others. She does not speak up at meetings and feels extremely uncomfortable presenting her work. This is becoming a real problem as a key component of her position is presenting ideas to potential clients. What strategies would you use to increase her self-efficacy? So take some time, take a few minutes to think about this, write down what you think, and then we'll move to the next one. Okay, how'd you go with that? Hopefully you got a few good ideas. Let's move to the next one. So recently you've recruited a highly qualified expert in your team. A person has 20 years experience in the industry, however, they've only worked for one company. So while their skills are excellent, they're struggling with being out of their comfort zone. You can see they're finding it difficult to adjust to the new culture and they're losing confidence. And you're worried that they're actually going to go back to their old company. So, what would you do to help them? Alrighty, next one. You are a young and ambitious manager in a big company. You've got lots of ideas about how to move your team forward, but your managing director, your boss, is very resistant to change. His favorite sayings are, let's stick with what we do best. And if it's not broken, why fix it? So you can see you're losing your competitive edge. What strategies can you come up with for increasing your manager's beliefs your team can succeed while trying new things? Okay, last one. You've recently taken over managing a department from someone who was extremely critical and aggressive. It is easy to tell that most of the employees are low in confidence and doubt themselves. There are high levels of disengagement and low levels of motivation throughout the department. What do you think you should do? Alrighty. Hope you went well. What we're going to do now is I'm going to talk about some strategies that you can do in general, and hopefully they might line up with some of your existing ideas. If not, they'll hopefully provide you with some new ideas in terms of how you can build up self-efficacy. So there are four main things that Bandura says we can do to increase self-efficacy, and they are mastery experiences, social persuasion, social modeling, and psychological responses. So the first idea is mastery. As Bandura says, the most effective way of developing a strong sense of efficacy is through mastery experiences. That is, when you're doing a task, the best way to build up your confidence in your ability to do the task is actually to do the task in ways that sort of help succeed. So I've already talked about this before with computer games. So when you think about a computer game, right? Those of you who are gamers, when you start playing a computer game, they don't give you a really difficult task at the very beginning. In fact, they start you at beginner level or level 0, where all you're learning to do is like walk around or do very basic things, and you succeed at that, and that builds up your self-efficacy to continue on. Right. So if you want to, going back to the thing about, for example, giving talks, being able to present in front of people, right? What you might want to do is build that person's mastery experience. Give them a simple task, simple basic task where they have to talk in front of people, but not necessarily give a huge speech, or not necessarily talk to thousands of people. Maybe just talk to 5 people. At the morning tea, give a quick update. Those of you who are at some of you might say, I'm introverted. Part of this subject is to talk in front of people. I don't have a lot of self-efficacy when it comes to talking out in class. Well, one thing we can do is build master experiences, right? Pre-prepare an answer. So in advance, when you look at a topic, that David Chang probably is going to ask, certain questions. You might be able to pre-prepare some answers, or even better, pre-prepare a question. So you look at the topic for next week and you're like, well, I want to participate, but I'm low in self-efficacy when it comes to speaking in class. So maybe I can't give an answer. Maybe that's hard for me to do. But what I can do is give I can ask a question in class. That will help with participation. So if you write down the question in advance and you put up your hand during the class, you can almost read out your question. You can practice your question, right? And then when you ask your question, you participate. If you've pre-prepared it, it's probably going to be a good question, and that will build your confidence in your ability to participate. So that's the idea of mastery experiences. Doing stuff in such a way that builds your mastery over something, right? You want mastery in participating or speaking, then start with just small little things which help build your confidence and ability in being able to speak in front of people. Social modeling, right? Witnessing other people successfully completing a task is another way of doing things. So, sorry, I've jumped to number 3, but let's talk about that. Social modeling. So, oftentimes, you get asked to do a task, and you go, "I got no idea how to do this." But then when you see somebody else do it, you think, "Hey, actually, it's not too hard to do at all. If only I'd seen that person do it in advance, I would have, put up my hand immediately and said I could do that job." Yeah. So social modeling is another way of building up your self-efficacy. So you get asked to do something, you're not sure how to do it. A lot of us will say no, but another way of doing it is say, "Yeah, look, I'm interested in doing that thing, but let me have a look at other people and how they do it first." That's another way to build your self-efficacy. Again, if you look at public speaking, if you want to build our self-efficacy and ability in public speaking, watching other people speak helps us or helps you in building up your self-efficacy. Social persuasion, encouraging other people, right? So some of us are bad at this, like we don't encourage others, or when people encourage us, we just try not to listen to them. But actually listening to other people's encouragement is actually very helpful and also very good for self-efficacy as well, right? So don't discount encouragement, actual verbal encouragement. You can do it. You're doing a good job. Those kinds of things are very helpful in building a person's self-efficacy. And finally, psychological responses, your own emotions. So we've talked about emotional intelligence before, and we know that being in a positive mood helps you to build your confidence in something. Being in a negative mood will obviously hinder this. So again, if we know that being high in self-efficacy helps people's performance, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, and you want to help your employees perform better, then you want to build their self-efficacy. Give them mastery experiences. Give them experiences where they can build their mastery in the area that you want them to do things. Use social persuasion. Encourage them about their ability to do that thing. Social modeling is helpful. You've got a junior staff member, right? Given a relatively new task, get them to watch somebody else who's more experienced do it. And finally, psychological responses. Even when you get them to do things, how you get them to do things, when you approach them with questions, when you encourage them with encouragement to do these things, how they're feeling does impact upon their self-efficacy. When they've just found something, they feel down, you tell them to do something else, then those negative emotions are going to influence their efficacy in doing this new thing. A few more other things you could get them to do. So, build a history of success goes to mastery. So, place yourself or place them in situations where you will succeed. So, use small things and then use stretch goals to push people further. Don't focus on failures or let failures stop you from trying again. This goes a little bit towards hope and resilience and things like that. Listen to other people's encouragement. Surround yourself with people who are competent at what you want to be competent at. Right. What's interesting is they look at children and they find that children who are around other people who are better at doing things, generally speaking, perform better themselves. Right? Because they look at other people doing it and they go, "Well, if you can do it, then I can do it too. So I'm going to try and do it." Right? So that is really helpful if you surround yourself with other people who are doing the thing that you want to do. Okay. Okay, whoopsie, sorry. And don't choose unrealistically hard goals to start off with. Don't try to climb Mount Everest when you haven't been able to go up Mount Ainslie or Black Mountain, right? Start small and move higher. All right. One thing I want you to think about, and this is another case where you may want to pause, you may want to reflect upon this, but how might self-efficacy and your strengths work together? Your VIA strengths I'm referring to here. Alrighty, now at this point I'm just about to close off this topic, but I want you to watch a video before we move further. So the video I want you to watch now is this video, is this video on self-efficacy here. It's about 11 or 12 minutes long. It's by a soccer coach who's also at university, so he's both a scholar, he's got a PhD, and he's also a coach, and he talks a lot about self-efficacy. Now, one thing to note, in this video he talks a lot about self-confidence, but if you listen to what he says is the definition of self-confidence, you'll hear that he's actually talking about self-efficacy. Okay, so watch that. When you finish watching that, spend some time reflecting upon it. Maybe you want to journal about it. How does it impact you? How does the thought, does it change the way you think about things? And then when you've done, come back and we'll move on to the next topic. Okay, so hopefully you've done that. Now we're going to move on to our next video, next topic, which is on resilience. So resilience is about, falling down, getting hit, hopefully not physically, but maybe physically, falling down, getting knocked down, and bouncing back up. So when we talk about resilience, we're talking about the capacity to rebound or bounce back from adversity, conflict, failure, or even positive events, progress, and increased responsibility. Right? We're talking about bouncing back from problems and difficulties. The resilience process is the experience of being disrupted by change, opportunities, adversities, stresses, or challenges, and after some disorder, assessing personal gifts and strengths to grow stronger through the disruption. Now, you need to think about this carefully in many ways. One thing I've got to sort of mention is that as people here at ANU, most of us may not have hit a lot of problems before. We may have generally been successful, or not really been, knocked down by adversity, conflict. Maybe a little bit of difficulty, but a little bit of difficulty is not rebounding from, failure. So when we're talking about resilience, we're talking about rebounding from big things like failure, adversity, real big difficulties. That's what we're really referring to. And it's an important thing to know because, as I said before, at ANU, if you're here, chances are a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us may not have faced a lot of huge adversity. We've been mostly successful. But when you become a leader, you're going to face a lot of difficulty and potential failures. When you think about Olympians, champions of sport, top managers, if you talk to them carefully, you'll find that many of them have faced a lot of difficulty through their life. If you go even back through the first few readings from the first few weeks of this course, when they talk about, minding your life story and things like that, you'll find that, a lot of them talk about difficulties that they faced in their life, maybe during their childhood or during their teens or whenever it might be, during their life circumstances, and this helps shape who they are today. Now, resilience, being good at resilience, obviously the key benefit is being able to bounce back from setbacks faster and easier than those who are low in resilience, right? Being high in resilience helps you to cope with stress. It leads to greater well-being, and usually those with high in resilience approach challenges and new experiences in a difficult way. And this, all in all, leads to improvement. Not improvement, but it leads to improved performance. Now, again, this is a case where you might want to journal about this. Write down a time when you bounced back. What happened to you? What tools did you use to help you? And how did you react when a similar or same thing happened again? Right? Think about your resilience. Now, what I want to do at this point in time is I'm going to get you to watch a video, another video, and this is a video on resilience. So this is less quite different to the last video you watched. This one's just to give you an example of what I mean by resilience. So this is the resilience video here that you'll probably find on your course website. So go watch that. It's about 10-12 minutes long, and it's about one of my favorite people, Ernest Shackleton. Okay, so now I hope you've watched that video. Now, if you look at Shackleton, you can see here, Shackleton isn't somebody who, faced a little bit of difficulty. He's on the ice for so long, his ship basically falls apart. He gets off, they walk miles and miles thinking they'd get to where they need to be. No, it's not going to be that. Then they have to, it's freezing cold. They have to get into a boat. They go to an island, which is almost nobody gets to, and there's nobody there. Then they have to go to another place, right? He takes a limited amount of his crew. He gets there. He has to walk basically a marathon, 40 kilometers plus over, cold, freezing mountains, which nobody has gotten through. Again and again and again, he faces huge adversity, and he bounces back. So that's a good example of resilience, and it's probably one of the exemplars when we talk about resilience. That's what we mean by resilience, obviously on a much grander scale. But it's, kind of inspiring watching this video, yeah? Now, when it comes to resilience, I'm not going to show this video. There's a link there if you want to. But you'll find a lot of other people faced a lot of difficulties. So Michael Jordan, one of the best all-time basketballers, I would say the greatest, but I know some of you might disagree with me. Maybe some of you will say the second or third greatest basketball. He got kicked off his own high school basketball team. You heard from the very first video, people like J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter author, how many times she should get rejected from writing her books. Colonel Sanders, the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, or KFC as we now know it, he had hundreds, if some people would say thousands, of rejections from trying to sell his 11 herbs and spices recipe until finally one restaurant decided to take it on. Successful people face a lot of setbacks. Another good example is Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. He got kicked out of Apple himself. So you think about it. He founded Apple. He got Apple pretty successful. Apple kicked him out of his own company. Yeah, and then he still came back. He went and created another company, did a lot of other things, and then came back. But could you imagine you found your own company, it's pretty successful, and you get kicked out of your own company, right? You need resilience to bounce back. So how do we build resilience? Well, we need to first be aware of how the world works, right? Failures occur. Very successful people fail. From last week, or not last week, but from previous weeks, we've learnt that success is not always a function of your own work as well, right? We know that sometimes luck might be involved, or who might be involved in terms of how successful you are. So we need to be aware that the world doesn't always work as in what you do leads guaranteed to success. It's not like a one-to-one relationship, right? Knowing that helps you to get back up again when you've fallen down or when difficulties happen, and to try again. All right? When you want to build resilience, take decisive actions, move towards your goals, look for opportunities. So this is all about moving forward, right? You want to do something even when difficulty happens, keep moving forward, even if it's small steps. Cultivate a growth mindset. We'll talk a lot about this in the coming weeks. Take care of yourself. This is really important. So even when we talk about, the networking week, when we talk about loneliness, it's important to look after yourself. Your own physical and emotional and mental well-being is extremely important, especially when those failures occur. And finally, accept that change is part of living, right? Change is difficult. Change will happen to all of us. Sometimes it's something we can affect. Sometimes it's something we can't affect, but in terms of we can't change the change or affect the change, right? But we need to be aware that it does occur. Looking back on some of the other things you can think about over the course, remember that your emotions are important to your resilience, right? Live in your negativity and you'll definitely reduce your resilience, right? I've said this time and time again, negative emotions are useful. Feel your negative emotions, but don't live there. Understand that positive emotions can help build your resilience. Negative emotions, especially if you live in your negative emotions, will kill your resilience. Totally trash your resilience, so don't do that. Build your networks. Your networks are helpful, not just in terms of resources, but in terms of people who can help you emotionally, people when things are difficult, people who can help you in your self-efficacy. Work on your mind. We'll talk about that over the coming weeks. And give. We'll talk about in the very last couple of weeks, of course, we're going to talk about giving and how giving actually helps you resilience. Okay, so that's resilience. We're now going to move on to optimism. And optimism, last two topics we're going to do quite quickly. So what's your perception of optimism, right? Is it all about happy clappy, being positive all the time? Yeah, the universal question we always ask is the glass half full or is it half empty? Schulman says the benefits of optimism have been proven: increased motivation, superior achievement in various domains, better physical health. Now, some of you might say, well, I'm a glass half empty person. I'm not an optimistic person. Well, just like we learned that positive emotions and happiness can be learnt and can be trained, and it's not just a function of the situation. Optimistic thinking can be learnt, right? Now, this is an important thing. When they do studies of optimism, right, they learn that optimists and pessimists think in the same ways, but they do at different times and for different events. We often talk about your ability to explain things, right? Explanatory ability, or your explanatory natures. So, how do optimists and pessimists see things? So, in this table, you can see the optimist and the pessimist, and you can see permanence and pervasiveness. So, permanence is, do you believe something is, permanent? It's not going to change. Or do you see something, so you can sometimes think things are permanent, or you might say, well, actually they're temporary. They're around for now, but things will change. And pervasiveness. Do you think it's kind of like the universal rule, it always happens like this, or this is a temporary thing? So let's give you an example. You're walking around, and a positive event happens to you. Somebody comes along and they offer you a job, right? You were looking for a job, you weren't expecting a job, but you meet somebody somewhere and they go, come in for an interview, I think you'll be good for this job, right? So, you're pretty positive. If you're an optimist, how do you see this permanent? How do you see this event? Somebody coming and offering you an interview for a job. Well, you'll see this as a permanent thing. Look, I can get this job from this thing. It's not going to change. They're not going to suddenly change their mind. It's going to go well, right? A pessimist will say, well, this is temporary. Oh, yeah, they offered me an interview. That's really good. It could lead to a job, but it won't be too long before they find out I'm not actually that good. Or, once I get to the interview, this good news of getting an interview, of having an interview, it's just going to disappear because they're going to work out I'm not suitable, and then I'm going to lose the opportunity. Yeah. So, is a good thing permanent or temporary? Right? Somebody gives you some money, or you buy some shares or Bitcoin or whatever that goes up. An optimist will say, well, generally speaking, this will last longer. A pessimist will go, no, it's only very temporary. It will just disappear very quickly. Right? In terms of pervasiveness, is this universal, or again, is this temporary? Does the world just work like this? Generally speaking, good things happen, or again, is it just, very short-lived and this will disappear? So we look at negative events, we have the same thing, right? Optimists thinks the same thing. So optimists and pessimists view negative events in exactly the opposite direction, right? So you're walking along, you get injured, right? You stuff up your leg, for example, right? An optimist will say, look, I've stuffed up my leg, maybe I've got to do some surgery or do rehabilitation. It's not going to be fun, but look, it's going to get better. It's only temporary. Right? A pessimist will go, oh, look, I broke my leg. Oh, it's not going to heal very well. And, I really like running, but now I'm not going to be able to run well. And even if I can run, I'm not going to be run as well as I used to. And it's just not going to be as good anymore. Right? So a pessimist will see that leg injury as in some way being permanent. An optimist will go, yeah, it's going to be around, but it's going to get better. On the flip side, again, the pessimist will look, whenever I try and run, whenever I try and do things just go bad. It's always going bad, right? An optimist will go, look, it went wrong, it wasn't great, but, again, this is only temporary, this is just a one-off, things will get better. I don't have accidents all the time. So optimists and pessimists have different, what we call explanatory styles. We explain the same event in different ways, and that can influence us. So remember, you want to be optimistic, you want to be hopeful, right? So hope, which is about willpower and way power. Do you know how to do it? Way power. Can you do it? Willpower, agency is really important, and you want to be optimistic in those kinds of things. So If we go to the next slide, you see Snyder defines being hopeful as believing that you can set goals, figure out how to achieve them, and motivate yourself to accomplish them. It connects a lot to self-efficacy, isn't it? It's not quite a self-efficacy, but it's close to self-efficacy. Do you believe you can figure out how to achieve them? Not necessarily do you believe you can do them right now, for example, right? Hope has a very positive impact on academic achievement, athletic accomplishment, emotional health, and the ability to cope with illness and other hardships. Yep. So hope is really, really important as well. So there we have it, 4 parts of psychological capital. All right, if we go back, so in summary here, we've got self-efficacy. Do you believe you can do something, right? Can you build your self-efficacy in general? Yes, you can. There are certain mastery experiences, social persuasion, all those things. You can build your own, and you can build the self-efficacy of other people, and that will lead to increased performance, right? Resilience. Are you resilient? Are you able to bounce back when setbacks happen? Really important skill to build as well, right? And connecting to the things that we've talked about in the last few weeks, understanding how the world works is important to your ability to bounce back. Yep. We have hope, which we just spoke about very, very, very quickly, and also optimism. Optimism is about explanatory style. How do you explain the things that occur to you? The good things, do you think of them as being permanent? The bad things, do you think of them as temporary? Or do you think the good things are temporary and the bad things are permanent, right? Same events, we just look at them in different ways. So it's important to try and be optimistic, to think about them in different, in the right light. Now, as I'm hoping you've done in the last few weeks, where I've been challenging the way you think about things, I'm hoping that just as you now probably realize that happiness is not about the situation, 10% or so about the situation, but how you approach or think about the situation plus a bit of genetics. I'm also hoping too, now that when you think about positive or negative events, a lot of it is about how you explain what occurred, and especially in light of like last week where we talked about the myth of meritocracy, right? Where we know that sometimes things don't happen just, good things don't always happen to good people or the people with merit. Sometimes bad things happen to the people who have merit, or not so good things. They don't get the job, they don't get the promotion. And sometimes, people who are not so good, they're not so deserving, they're not so meritorious, get things. Yeah. Hopefully that will help you with regard to resilience, with regard to optimism as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this particular class. You'll notice obviously it's a lot shorter than our normal class, but I do hope that you spend quite a bit of time thinking through the topics, thinking through the way these things affect you, and you can certainly journal about them if you want to. Hopefully that's it, and I'll see you in the next class.